The War College floated in the silence of space like a crown of steel and crystal, an academic fortress built not for conquest, but for the sharpening of minds. Its great halls hummed with voices from dozens of worlds, a tapestry of dialects and philosophies woven together by the promise of strategic brilliance. To most who entered its vaulted chambers, the place was sacred ground, a temple of logic where battle was reduced to diagrams and algorithms. To Sergeant Marcus Hale, it felt like a trial ground, and he knew every eye in that amphitheater was waiting for him to stumble. He was the lone human in a chamber crowded with admirals, warlords, and tacticians from species that measured their empires in millennia. The air was thick with the ozone tang of energy projectors, but heavier still with disdain. Hale had seen that look before, first in boot camp from drill instructors who thought him unfit, later in battlefields where alien allies sneered at his improvised orders. Now it radiated from every jeweled crest and armored carapace around him, a belief that humanity was raw, unrefined, little more than muscle, with barely the wit to aim its cannons straight. The presiding general, a towering Varric whose 4 tusks curled like ivory hooks, raised his clawed hand to still the crowd. "We are gathered," he intoned, his voice resonant as a drumbeat, "to test the mettle of Earth's soldier. He claims knowledge of siegecraft, that most delicate of arts. Let him prove it." Hale stepped forward, boots echoing on the polished black floor. His uniform was simple, unadorned, and the insignia on his chest seemed insignificant beside the ornamented sashes and gilded armor surrounding him. He did not bow or salute in the florid styles these officers expected. He simply squared his shoulders, dark eyes steady, jaw set like stone. The general's mandibles clicked. "You will face the siege tactics test. A fortress shall be simulated. You may command forces drawn from your world's history. Your task is to reduce the stronghold or defend it, depending on the round. Fail, and humanity's petition for equal strategic recognition is denied." A ripple of amusement spread through the tiers of alien commanders. Some whispered wagers, others smirked openly. Hale felt their eyes rake over him like scalpels, dissecting him before the contest had even begun. He let them believe what they wanted. He had not come here for their approval. He had come to plant a seed of unease. One of the Sithari tacticians, a thin creature with translucent skin that showed the flicker of veins beneath, raised his voice. "What method will you employ, human? Do you even have one? Or is this bluff the sum of your so-called legacy?" The chamber stilled, anticipation coiling like a drawn bow. Hale's lips curved into a half-smile, not warm but cutting, the expression of a man who had been underestimated all his life and learned to make that underestimation into a weapon. He let the silence hang for a heartbeat longer before answering. "Do you want them ancient?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly, "modern or secret?" The reaction was immediate. Laughter, derision, the clatter of clawed hands on railings, the sharp hiss of disbelief. Ancient? To these beings, human antiquity was savagery, an age of stone and iron, of mud walls and wooden spears. Modern? That word was a child's boast in a galaxy that had wielded fusion cannons before humans had split the atom. And secret? What secret could a species barely emerged from its own cradle possess? But Hale did not flinch. He let their scorn wash over him and waited until the echoes of laughter began to falter, until curiosity pricked beneath their arrogance. His eyes swept the room, daring them to dismiss him outright, daring them to risk discovering too late that his words carried weight. The Varric general leaned forward, his tusks gleaming. "You presume much, human. You believe your species has 3 answers to one question." "I don't believe," Hale said evenly. "I know. And whichever you choose, the fortress will fall." The silence that followed was no longer dismissive, but sharpened with a thin edge of interest. Some of the alien officers shifted uneasily, as if suspecting a trap in the calm certainty of his tone. Others leaned forward, predatory eyes glittering with the thrill of challenge. The general rumbled, "Very well. You shall have your chance. Choose your field, Sergeant Hale, and let us see whether your words are anything more than smoke." Hale gave no outward sign of triumph, though a fire flickered in his chest. This was the opening he needed, not their respect, not yet, but their attention. That was always the first breach in any wall, the crack through which pressure would pour until the structure collapsed. He had forced them to listen, and soon he would force them to learn. The chamber's lights dimmed as the tactical holosphere descended from the ceiling, unfolding into a spinning globe of projected terrain. Towers, ramparts, and bastions rose in glowing lines of light, forming the fortress he would face. Hale studied it in silence, measuring walls, tracing supply routes, noting choke points invisible to untrained eyes. Around him, the alien strategists watched too, some smug, others skeptical. None of them saw what he saw, the cracks already forming, the weaknesses disguised as strengths. He did not rush. Siege, after all, was not a game of speed but of endurance. He let the anticipation build, let them grow restless in their certainty that he was stalling. Then he straightened, turned to the general, and said in a voice steady as a drumbeat, "We'll start with ancient." The declaration landed like a stone in still water, ripples of disbelief spreading through the assembly. Ancient. He had chosen the most laughable of his own offers, the option most likely to confirm their prejudice. Some shook their heads, others snorted with open ridicule. But Hale's gaze remained fixed on the fortress projection, unblinking, unshaken. For him, this was not about reenacting history. It was about reminding the galaxy of a truth it had forgotten. Every wall, no matter how tall, could be pulled down if the right mind was patient enough to see the way. The general gestured, claws clicking against the console. "So be it. Ancient it is. Show us, human, how your kind once waged war against stone and iron." The holosphere shifted, overlaying armies of men in armor, rows of siege towers, ranks of archers, the raw ingenuity of 1,000 forgotten wars. And as the murmurs swelled into derision, Hale's smile sharpened like a blade hidden in plain sight. The test had begun. The fortress stood tall in the projection, its luminous battlements casting spectral shadows across the chamber. Towers glowed with the suggestion of energy fields, gates shimmered with reinforced plating, and watchtowers hummed with automated defenses. To the aliens who watched from their seats, it was a marvel of simulated perfection. To Marcus Hale, it was merely another wall waiting to fall. He had seen stronger positions crumble, though their defenders swore they were unassailable. He had learned the truth long before stepping into this hall. Nothing man-made, or alien-made, was eternal. He gave no dramatic speech, no flourish of command. Instead, he began with quiet, methodical orders. "Dig trenches," he told the simulated commanders arrayed before him. "Fortify the lines. Start sapping beneath their foundations." The holograms responded with uncanny realism, swarms of ancient soldiers setting to work with pick, spade, and timber. Around them, catapults rose from the earth like skeletal giants, ropes straining, stones poised for launch. Siege towers groaned into being, their wooden frames clattering with the promise of imminent violence. Laughter erupted from the tiers above. The Scythery tactician, his translucent skin glowing with derisive amusement, leaned forward. "Wood and rope? Dirt and sweat? This is your grand tactic? Your ancestors must have been as slow-witted as you are." Others joined in, their voices a chorus of disdain. Hale did not look up. He had heard worse ridicule in training camps where recruits had broken down from the weight of mockery. Words were nothing. He measured victory in cracks and collapses, not applause. Time in the simulation accelerated, hours passing in the blink of moments. The fortress endured its first assault, stones hurled against walls, fire pots shattering into sheets of flame. The defenders fought back with volleys of arrows and boiling oil, and many of the attackers fell screaming. To the aliens, it was confirmation of their expectations. Primitive, bloody, ineffective. But then the pattern shifted. While the defenders strained to douse fires and mend breaches, tunnels crept beneath their foundations. The audience watched as dirt shifted silently under glowing walls, supports braced with beams, until at last one collapsed in a spray of dust and rubble. The fortress shuddered. What had been perfect symmetry was now a broken line. The aliens' laughter faltered. Marcus's voice remained steady, a calm counterpoint to the chaos. Starve them, he instructed. Block the supply routes. Let their garrison feel hunger before they feel steel. His holographic soldiers obeyed, intercepting caravans, poisoning wells, dragging out the siege with cold patience. Weeks flew by in the simulation, each day draining the defenders' reserves. Fires smoked endlessly from the fortress, but fewer torches burned along its walls. The Cythery sneered again, though his voice carried less certainty. You waste time. Prolonging their suffering is not victory. Hale finally looked up, his gaze pinning the alien where he sat. Victory isn't measured by how fast you break a wall. It's measured by whether the enemy can rise again after you've finished. Time is just another weapon, one most of you never learned to wield. Murmurs swept the chamber. Not all were convinced, but some shifted uneasily, recalling wars where overconfidence had cost them campaigns. The Varick general leaned forward, his tusks gleaming in the simulated firelight. He, at least, understood the patience of predators. The battle reached its climax when the sappers struck again. With a thunderous crack, an entire bastion caved inward, defenders tumbling in waves of dust and screams. Siege towers rolled forward, their bridges slamming down onto fractured walls. The fortress, so pristine at the outset, was now a bleeding ruin. Within minutes, its defenders surrendered, their banners thrown down into the dirt. The simulation ended, the fortress dissolving into light. Silence filled the chamber where mockery had once reigned. Hale stood motionless, his expression unreadable, though inside his chest the steady rhythm of satisfaction beat strong. He had not just toppled a fortress, he had cracked their certainty. Finally, the general spoke, his deep voice carrying weight. This was unexpected. Primitive tools, yet applied with precision. You would have us believe this was strategy, not desperation. Hale met his gaze, without flinching. It was strategy then, and it is strategy now. Ancient doesn't mean obsolete. Siege warfare was never about the flash of weapons or the size of armies. It's about patience, pressure, and knowing your enemy will break before you do. My ancestors built empires with these methods while others still hid in caves. That's the legacy you saw here. Some of the aliens muttered in grudging acknowledgement. Others crossed their arms, eyes narrowed with refusal. But all had seen the fortress fall, and none could deny it. The lesson lingered, uncomfortable and sharp. Humans had drawn victory not from superiority of tools, but from sheer will and ingenuity. The Cythery tried one final barb. So you claim victory by grinding your enemy to dust over months of attrition. Impressive only to those with no concept of efficiency. Hale allowed himself the faintest of smiles. Efficiency is winning without wasting your men's lives needlessly. If you think speed matters more than survival, then maybe that explains why your people lose wars they should win. Gasps spread through the chamber at the audacity of his retort, but Hale had already turned back to the projection. His eyes lingered on the fading outline of the fortress, not in gloating but in calculation. He knew this was only the beginning. The ancient had served its purpose, to unsettle, to demonstrate depth. Now the real test awaited, the modern. The general's claws tapped against the console, his voice low and thoughtful. Very well, Sergeant Hale. You have shown us the old. Now we shall see what your present holds. The holosphere flared anew, the fortress rebuilding itself in harder lines, defenses sharper, bristling with technologies drawn from galactic arsenals. The crowd leaned forward, eagerness and skepticism rekindled. Hale did not move, not yet. He let the moment stretch, savoring the silence before the storm. Then, with quiet certainty, he said, "Modern, then." And the chamber exhaled, hungry for the next revelation. The fortress returned in sharper form, its walls no longer stone but alloys infused with energy lattices, its towers crowned with sensor arrays and rail cannons. Shields shimmered across its gates like liquid fire, and defensive drones traced tireless circles in the simulated sky. The murmurs among the alien officers rose with anticipation. Now, they thought, the human would be forced into relevance, measured not against a relic of his past, but against the weapons of the galaxy's present. This was the true test, and they leaned forward like vultures waiting for the moment of collapse. Marcus Hale studied the holographic citadel in silence. He had expected the transition, the tightening of the noose. Yet where others saw impregnable walls, he saw fragile dependencies. Sensors relied on power. Shields demanded constant energy flow. Automated defenses were only as clever as the algorithms guiding them. Complexity was not invulnerability. Complexity only created more seams for a patient mind to pry open. He gave his first orders without theatrics. Launch reconnaissance swarms. The simulation obeyed, and a cloud of drones, each no larger than a fist, took flight, spreading out in a lattice around the fortress. Hale tracked their feeds, studying patterns, charting blind zones, mapping response times of the defender systems. Every adjustment, every delay, told him where to press next. Jamming protocols, he commanded. The swarm shifted, some drones flickering with false signatures, others broadcasting phantom armies on the horizon. The fortress's defenses pivoted, energy cannons firing at ghosts, wasting precious reserves. Hale allowed them to overextend, like a boxer leaning into an empty punch. Then came the artillery. Not the crude stones of antiquity, but precision rail slugs, guided munitions, and coordinated barrages. He timed them to strike not at the strongest walls, but at the nodes of the shield projectors. Sparks showered the holographic battlefield as the defenders scrambled to reroute power. The aliens in the chamber nodded grudgingly now, recognizing efficiency, recognizing that the human was speaking in their language of war at last. But Hale did not stop there. He layered deception upon deception. Broadcast on their comms, he ordered. His forces began transmitting fabricated messages, reports of famine among the defenders, whispers of betrayal, pleas from supposed allies that reinforcements would never arrive. The fortress, though simulated, reacted as its programming dictated: hesitation, confusion, conflicting orders among the garrison. One of the alien strategists, a scaled warlord with a throat that pulsed as he hissed, frowned deeply. That is psychological interference. His tone carried both disdain and unease. You pollute the clarity of battle. Hale did not bother to look at him. War is never clear. It's a storm. If you can make the enemy doubt, they'll drown in it before your bullets ever touch them. The rail batteries fired again, this time coordinated with drone interference that blinded the fortress's targeting systems for 3 precious seconds. That window was enough. The munition struck, collapsing one of the shield nodes entirely. A gap yawned open in the protective veil, and Hale's simulated troops surged forward in disciplined formation, their advance covered by suppressive fire. The aliens stirred uneasily. They had expected brute force, a headlong rush, perhaps some desperate attempt at glory. What they saw instead was cold calculation, a rhythm of pressure and release, deception and precision. Hale was not simply battering the fortress, he was peeling it apart layer by layer, forcing it to consume itself. The Varick general finally spoke, tusks gleaming in the glow of the holosphere. This is familiar, he admitted. Coordinated strikes, layer deception, exploitation of weak points. This is competence. His tone was reluctant but not dismissive. Yet I see little here beyond what any of our academies teach. Hale heard the words but did not answer immediately. He knew that to speak too soon would weaken the lesson. Instead, he waited as the fortress's systems faltered further, as power relays overloaded, as drone swarms slipped through blind spots to strike at ammunition stores. Explosions bloomed across the projection, and only then did he turn his head toward the general. Competence, Hale said evenly, isn't born from abundance. It's born from scarcity. You've had your technologies for millennia. You grew soft leaning on them. Humanity clawed for survival with less than nothing. Every war, on our world, taught us not just how to fight with what we had, but how to turn weakness into a weapon. That's the difference you're seeing. The words landed heavily. Some in the chamber bristled, offended at the accusation of softness. Others sat in thoughtful silence, troubled by the implication. They had seen empires fall not to superior armies, but to relentless enemies who refused to break. The humans' words echoed too close to truths they preferred to forget. The fortress shuddered toward its end, its defenders scattered by misinformation, its walls breached by precision. Within minutes, the simulation declared victory for Hale's forces. The projection dissolved into fading light, leaving only the soldier standing calmly in the chamber's center. There was no laughter now, no open mockery, only a wary quiet, the silence of predators who had glimpsed something unexpected in their supposed prey. Hale did not gloat, did not smile. He stood with the same steady posture as before, as if the destruction of a galactic fortress was merely another step in a long march. The Sithari tactician, who had mocked him most openly before, broke the silence with a thin, uncertain voice. "You've shown us your antiquity. You've shown us your present. But still, I am unconvinced. Where is the uniqueness you claim? Where is this secret you boast of?" Hale's gaze shifted toward him, dark eyes unwavering. "You've seen what my people built with stone. You've seen what we do with steel. But neither of those are what makes us dangerous." He let the words hang, heavy and deliberate. "The real weapon is something you haven't accounted for. Something you can't measure with walls or cannons." The chamber tensed. They wanted to scoff, but something in his tone kept them still. Even the general leaned forward, tusks gleaming in the pale light. "Then show us," he said. Hale nodded once, sharp as a blade's edge. "Very well. You've had ancient. You've had modern. Now," his voice dropped to a low, deliberate cadence, "you'll have secret." The holosphere flared again, brighter than before, as if even the simulation itself sensed the shift. And in the silence that followed, every officer present felt an unease coil in their gut, a warning that what came next might not only test a fortress, but their very understanding of war itself. "You said." The holosphere expanded until it filled the chamber, a vast lattice of light sculpting the final fortress. It loomed higher than before, its walls layered with redundant defenses, its towers bristling with automated turrets and overlapping shields. It was not merely strong, it was designed to erase the very possibility of weakness. The alien commander sat straighter, certain now that no trick, no archaic patience or clever deception could hope to bring down such a construct. Marcus Hale studied it with the same quiet composure he had shown from the beginning. He let the image settle, let the fortress flaunt its perfection before every pair of alien eyes. Then he gave his first order, not to his simulated troops but to the program itself. "Initiate morale variables." The command caused a ripple of surprise through the chamber. Morale was rarely modeled in war colleges. Alien forces preferred the clean predictability of numbers and firepower. Hale had just invited chaos into the equation. His soldiers began their assault not with cannons or siege towers, but with shadows of intent. Units feigned retreat, scattering as though broken. Others advanced under flags of surrender, only to collapse the moment defenders moved to capture them. Conflicting signals bloomed across the defenders' channels, broadcasts of fabricated orders and desperate pleas. Within the simulation, defenders argued, second-guessed, and hesitated. Hale was not breaking their walls, he was breaking their minds. The audience shifted uncomfortably. They had expected machines of war. Instead, they saw manipulation woven into every maneuver. The fortress fired endlessly, but too often at targets that weren't there, at enemies that had already vanished, at phantoms stitched into existence by human deceit. The more it fought, the more its defenses unraveled. One of the reptilian warlords slammed his clawed hand against the railing. "This is not warfare. This is trickery, corruption of discipline." His voice cracked with anger, but beneath it was fear. He saw the danger clearly, even if he refused to admit it aloud. Hale answered without raising his voice. "Every fortress has a door. If you can't find it in the stone, you find it in the men holding the gate. They are always the weakest point. Always." The words lingered, sharp as glass, while the simulation bore them out. A squad of his soldiers infiltrated disguised as defectors, their false submission rewarded with access. Once inside, they turned seized weapons against the garrison, sowing chaos behind the walls. Simultaneously, other units sabotaged supply caches, igniting fires that spread panic faster than any artillery strike. The alien generals watched as the impregnable fortress, bristling with every defense technology known to them, dissolved into collapse, not by superior firepower but by distrust, confusion, and betrayal. Shields flickered not because of external bombardment, but because power was misrouted by panicked operators. Gates opened not from destruction but from hesitation, defenders too unsure of orders to act decisively. The fortress fell not with a roar but with a whimper, its strength rotted from within. When the simulation ended, the silence was total. The fortress's light disintegrated, leaving only Marcus standing in the center of the chamber, shoulders square, eyes steady. He let the quiet stretch, let the enormity of what they had witnessed settle like weight upon their chests. At last, the Varic general spoke, his deep voice slower now, cautious. "What was that?" Hale's expression did not shift, though his words cut with precision. "That was the secret. You've all convinced yourselves that war is decided by walls, cannons, shields. But wars are decided by people. You don't need to kill every soldier to win. You just need to make them doubt, hesitate, turn on each other. Once there will breaks, their walls might as well already be rubble." The chamber bristled with conflicting reactions. Some alien commanders leaned back in thought, their expressions dark with the recognition of a truth they had long ignored. Others bared teeth or mandibles, muttering that such methods were dishonorable, dangerous, unworthy of a true warrior. But none could dismiss the result. They had seen a fortress stronger than any they could build fall without its walls truly being touched. The Sithari tactician, who had mocked Hale from the beginning, rose to his feet, his translucent skin glowing with anger. "What you have shown is not strategy, it is corruption. You twist minds, you poison trust, you rot the foundations of honor itself." Hale met his outrage with calm finality. "Call it what you like. But if it works, if it wins, then it's war. My people didn't survive by playing fair. We survived by doing whatever it took. That's our secret, and it's why no fortress, no empire, will ever be safe from us." The tactician sat down slowly, fury burning in his gaze, but words stolen from his tongue. Around the chamber, whispers spread like brushfire. Some feared what humanity represented, a species that turned every disadvantage into a weapon, that used unpredictability and deception as readily as fire and steel. Others saw opportunity, the chance to learn from an ally who could teach them what no academy had ever dared. The Varic general's tusks gleamed as he regarded Hale, unreadable but thoughtful. At last, he inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement no human had received in that hall before. "You have given us much to consider, Sergeant Hale. Ancient, modern, secret, you have shown that your people carry more than we expected." Hale allowed himself the faintest ghost of a smile. "That was the point. Remember my question. No matter what you choose, ancient, modern, or secret, we'll find a way through. That's who we are." The lights of the chamber brightened once more, but the mood had changed. Gone was the laughter, the casual mockery. In its place was something heavier, sharper. Respect from some, fear from others, unease from all. The human marine had done what no weapon could have. He had breached the walls of their certainty. As Hale stepped back from the center, the holosphere vanishing into its cradle above, the chamber remained hushed. The warlords and tacticians sat in silence, each grappling with the same realization. Humanity was not a species to be dismissed. They were a species to be reckoned with. And for Marcus Hale, that silence was victory enough. "You said,